somebody can say a wee prayer or something.
That would be nice. Could I invite somebody who's with us to offer a prayer to start? But you will need to unmute yourself.
I'm happy to say a prayer.
Thank you.
Okay. Intone, O my servant, the verses of God that have been received by thee, as intoned by them who have drawn nigh unto him, that the sweetness of thy melody may kindle thine own soul and attract the hearts of all men. Whoso reciteth in the privacy of his chamber the verses revealed by God, the scattering angels of the Almighty shall scatter abroad the fragrance of the words uttered by his mouth, and shall cause the heart of every righteous man to throb. Though he may at first remain unaware of its effect, yet the virtue of the grace vouchsafed unto him must needs sooner or later exercise its influence upon his soul. Thus have the mysteries of the revelation of God been decreed by virtue of the will of him who is the source of power and wisdom. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Thoma. Friends, welcome to this first in a series of online sessions being convened alongside other celebrations to mark the centenary of the Baha'i Faith in Australia. Now, the purpose of the series is to generate interest in undertaking Baha'i history and biography. Our guest speakers are invited to share their skills and their knowledge as works in progress. And through this sharing, we will gain a better understanding of the origins of the Australian Baha'i community, as well as the gaps in our knowledge and in our understanding of what's required for additional homework on our own history. All are most welcome to join in. We don't want these sessions to distract anyone from the many compelling tasks of the current time. So today, the 30th of May, our first session is with Michael Vambeck, who joins us from Donegal in Ireland. This will be followed by sessions every Saturday evening for the forthcoming period of time. Next week, I'll give an overview of the Baha'i faith in Australia, as the history of the faith. 2 weeks' time, Aaron Blomley will come online and give his recollections of Baha'i service in Australia, the Pacific, and Asia. And there'll be many other presentations after that. I've also been asked to inform you of a presentation that's online tomorrow night, and I have put the information in the chat section. It's by economist Iraj Abedian. Tomorrow night, the 31st of May, the Zoom address is online for you there. And it's on our collective future beyond the core and because of COVID-19. So that's something for tomorrow night. So let's get on to our special session tonight. I've been in communication with Michael since 2017, when he shared with me his intention of making a presentation about Effie Baker at the Irish Summer School, which was being held in August 2018. He did proceed with that presentation, and it was so well received that he received invitations to make presentations in other communities as well. Today, he's making for the first time this presentation to predominantly an Australian audience. Michael, thank you for agreeing to do this for us. And I welcome you now, and I hand the session over to you. You can share your screen, and the rest of the evening is yours. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much, Graham, for your wonderful invitation. I hope everybody, I can't see everybody on the Zoom screen. I really appreciate, and I'm dumbstruck that there's so many people have joined. It's incredible. Because of the Zoom screen, I can only see a small number of you at any one time. I hope I don't bore you to death and you can understand my Irish accent. I don't really have a Donegal accent. That's a bit more like, I don't know if you know Daniel O'Donnell, it'll be a bit like that there, hey. So I'm originally from Dublin. I originally became a Baha'i around about 1981. And as I was sharing with some of the friends who were on earlier on, when I first became involved with the faith, I was very close to Adib Tarazadeh and Zebi Whitehead and people like that in the early days of the faith. I pioneered then in 1984 to Letterkenny in County Donegal, which is in the northwest coast. through to personal difficulties. I'm sure everybody has been there, but I withdrew from the faith around about 1989 and re-emerged out of my cocoon about 4 years ago. So how did I come upon my personal circumstances and difficulties just mounted and mounted, and I'd always kept in touch with one of the Baha'i friends who remained close, and when the difficulties became insurmountable, I rang him and asked him for a Baha'i prayer book, and it didn't take me long reading through a couple of prayers to realize what I'd missed out on. And I redeclared, and I've been a little bit active since. I went to the summer school that year, and I hadn't any Baha'i books apart from a prayer book. They were all gone. And so I went into the bookshop, and I wanted something. I'm not an academic at all, far from it. And I just wanted something easy and comfortable to read that would help me back into the faith, as it were. And I picked up this book. I don't know if you can see it very clearly in the light, but I'll read the title of it. It's Shoghi Effendi, Through the Pilgrim's Eye by Earl Redman. I'm sure many of you have seen this book. Basically, it's got lots of little like vignettes of the early believers going on pilgrimage to Haifa. And reading through it, I came upon the story of Effie Baker. I continued reading the book, and some days later, I don't know what happened, whether it was in the middle of the night, a dream or what, I went back. I got up in the middle of the night and went downstairs and reread the story of Effie Baker. And then I reread it again. And then at dawn, or whenever I feasibly could, I rang a couple of the Baha'i friends and asked, did they know anything about her? And what was her background? And nobody knew anything. But a couple of them pointed out to me that Earl Redman, the writer of the book, actually lived in County Cavan, which is about 70 or 80 kilometers south of where I live. So I got his phone number, rang him. I didn't think an author of a book would ever speak to a minion like me, but he was so wonderful and helped me, and he guided me actually towards Graham. And I contacted Graham, and I think Graham at first was a little bit hesitant to share any information. He probably thought I was going to steal his thunder. And I don't blame him for 1 second. But between the two of them, Earl and Graham, they guided me to the fact that Effie had taken all these wonderful photographs, which are, as you all know, I'm quite sure, the photographs that make up Nabil's narrative, the American version. And her photographs appear in there. So I wrote to the Universal House of Justice and asked, was there any more photographs? Because I had come now to an understanding that there were over 1,000 photographs taken by Effie. And after some months, the Universal House of Justice wrote back to me and said that they had photographs and they had plenty of them, and they shared some of those unpublished photographs with me on the basis that I would use them for the Irish Summer School and for Baha'i presentations. So hopefully, technologically wise, I can share some of those photographs with you during the course of this presentation. I have to point out that these photographs are copywritten by the Universal House of Justice, or the Baha'i World Centre. So if you see them, you can't record them and reuse them. These are exclusively the rights of the Baha'i World Centre. So they can't be reused or reproduced. So I would ask all of the friends that are following this today to observe that guidance, if you wouldn't mind. So why Effie Baker? I feel very inadequate talking about Effie Baker to Australians because she's your lady. And I'm on the other side of the world. What right have I got to talk about Effie Baker? I just fell in love with this character, this woman, this service, this dedication to duty and to Shoghi Effendi and to the faith. So a little bit of background about her. She was born on the 25th of March in 1880. We were having a discussion with some of the friends beforehand in Goldsburg. Maybe somebody can correct the pronunciation. She was the first of 10 children. Shortly after her birth, the family home was completely destroyed by fire. And as was the case in those days with families, she was kind of, as we say in Ireland, she was fostered out. So she went to live with an aunt, a maiden aunt, and her grandparents. The maiden aunt was a school teacher, principal of a school in a nearby, in the next, I think somebody else mentioned the name of that town, Balladrate. So she went to there. This lady was very educated and was able to guide and help Effie. She was creative and artistic. These skills she developed in Effie, and over the course of her young life, she became a great artist. She took a keen interest in photography. She took a keen interest in all of the arts, in fact. She had quite an inquiring mind. I actually have some of one of her pictures here. I'm going to see if I can try and share it. This is my nightmare about this Zoom thing, is actually finding the pictures to share with you. I'm always difficult. This is always a nightmare. But I'll try and see if I can find them. I'll keep talking in the meantime. I'm hopeless at this part of the technology. Okay. Sorry if anybody wants to interrupt while I'm doing this kind of thing and ask a question, please feel free.
I would prefer, Michael, that you focus on getting that up rather than doing two things at once.
Yeah, okay.
Show us, you will already have open on your computer, and then you will hit share screen and you will select that image.
Yeah.
Thank you, we can see it well.
Michael, you're on mute.
Michael, can you hear us? You're on mute. And
Sorry.
You're right
Can you
now.
hear me
Okay.
now?
We can see the image and we can hear you now.
Ah. Thank you. Sorry. So Effie would, to earn a living, I mean, women were still, even in Australia and across the globe, women were treated as second-class citizens and hadn't got the right to earn money in the same way and to be leaving the home in the same way as men could. There was very little equality, in fact, zero equality. So to earn some income, Effie would draw cards and sell them at church hall sales. So for example, this is one of her beautiful pieces. Unfortunately in this, it doesn't look as well as I have the real photograph, which I can show you. So this is some flora and fauna. So she would draw these and sell them, and she would make cards to give out, as I said, at jumble sales and various events to, you know, to earn a living. And I just think this is very beautiful. It's actually signed by her, and it tells you what it is as well. Everybody see that? I'm happy. I'll move it off. Have any of you seen this before?
Much bad Yes, I've seen her wildflower pictures before, many of them.
Okay.
I've also seen her, John Walker. I've also seen her wildflower pictures, which she took great pleasure in showing me personally.
Okay. Well, a lot of the photographs you may have seen before, because you folks are so more familiar with Effie than I'm trying to get another photograph here for you. So I'm just going to lead up to the her introduction to the faith in just a moment. So I just want to share one more before I do. Can you see that? Have I shared that? Probably not.
Click on it.
At the moment, we've got your index of slides, and whether you've done a double click to open it. But if you've already double clicked to open it, I think the limitation in Zoom is you have to nominate it to. Did you open it on your screen?
Yeah, I'm just sorry, trying to get to grips with the
There we go, we can see
here.
it now. Thank you, Michael, we can see it now. Go ahead.
Okay, and you can still hear me. I haven't gone and muted myself. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this photograph too. So this is Effie at her workbench making models from from pieces of balsam and various other pieces of wood. And in the foreground, you can see a little koala bear. She's made a little horse and cart. So she would make all of these things and sell them at fairs. And of course, around the early 1920s, when the late 1900s, at the introduction of the First World War, toys were almost impossible to source in Australia. So the Christmas market, there was a huge demand, and many people came to her and asked her, would she make these commercially to service the Christmas market? And she refused to do it because she didn't want to compromise the quality of her work for mass production. She would just make some pieces for some people. Okay. Everybody has seen that?
I've actually visited that house, and it was owned by a Baha'i named Stella Childs, who I found out much later that I'm actually related to. I have seen some of those toys that Stella had. I don't know what happened to them, probably in the family, but I've seen some of those toys and they're absolutely exquisite.
I think
here.
I believe Graham actually has one or two of her toys in his possession as well. And I don't know whether he has one of them there that he can show or not, but at some point he might be able to put his hand on it.
Michael, you're not going to distract me like that. I'm here to listen to you tonight. Proceed.
Anyway, sorry, moving on. So Effie had a rather inquiring mind, and in that period of time in the world, there was a movement of questioning about where people are going, what's life about, what's the purpose, what's the function. There was a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry, my nerves. There was a lot of church hall meetings about the meaning of life and the purpose of where we are and what we're doing and all this kind of thing. So as we all know, we're just past the, is it the 100th anniversary of Clara and Hyde Dunn's arrival in Australia? So they had arrived in Australia. And as you all know, I mean, I'm preaching to the converted here completely. Hyde Dunn took work as a sales rep, traveling around the country and setting up meetings in various hotels at night at the end of his day's work, talking about the faith. And he would also arrange to go to various church halls or any venue that would host one of his talks. And in one such talk in Melbourne, Effie came along and heard his presentation. And if I can find the wee quotation now, just give me a second. She went along to this meeting that Hyde Dunn was speaking at. Now, he did this all around the country. Sorry, I have to acknowledge at the start that most of the work and knowledge that I've gained is from the as of yet unpublished, about to be published book by Graham called Ambassador at the Court, The Life and Photography of Effie Baker. He very kindly shared this material with him. So a lot of my resource material has come from Graham. So he knows far more about this subject than me. Why I'm doing the presentation is... Anyway, I just developed a passion for this lady. So she turned up at the meeting and Hyde Dunn addressed, it was the New Civilization Centre in Melbourne on October the 22nd. And he said at the start of the meeting, "O son of spirit, free thyself from the worldly bond, escape from the prison of self, appreciate the value of time, for it will never come again, nor a like opportunity." I must say that now that has been since retranslated and is read as follows. So just to clarify that, "O my servant, free thyself from the fetters of this world and lose thy soul from the prison of self. Seize thy chance, for it will come to thee no more." Effie was immediately struck by this. She had come from quite a religious background, never questioning anything, and thought, well, why aren't I questioning it? I mean, why do I just accept automatically absolutely everything and not consider what this is actually about? So she listened to the rest of Hyde Dunn's talk, and of course he went through the history of the faith and the founder of the faith and the Bab and Baha'u'llah and the development of the faith. And immediately after the talk was over, she declared that she wanted to become a Baha'i. So she became the second person to become a Baha'i in Australia. Quite extraordinary that, you know, your soul is lit and you react. I think it's great. Of course, then following that, her whole life took on a new dimension. She became very close to Clara and Hyde Dunn and travelled with them extensively through Australia and into New Zealand. She carried on with her art, and I'm sure you all are aware that because of her art, she actually became quite ill. As any of us who do any art, exclude me, I couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler. But when she was painting, they used mostly lead paint at that time. She would dip the paintbrush into the paint, but rather than using the glass of water, which I have here to clean the brush, she put the brush to her lips and clean it. So she developed a type of lead poisoning, which made her quite ill and weak. So over the intervening years, she helped develop the faith with Clara and Hyde Dunn. And I do know I'm conscious of time, so I don't want to spend too much time on that aspect of her life, except to say that there was one story that I absolutely loved, was when Martha Ruth was coming to Australia. Clara and Hyde and a couple of other believers and Effie Baker took the long train journey from the east coast to the west coast to go to Perth. And they went and hired a little room called the Blue Gum Tree Room. And they had a restaurant in that little room upstairs. And they hired this little room and they did their presentations about the Baha'i faith. And they arrived in June. And by the time they left in July, they had formed a local spiritual assembly of Perth. And I just think that's really inspirational. I know in the medium term, that assembly didn't stay and had to be reformed some years later. But it still shows what can be done with perseverance, dedication, and a bit of prayer, or maybe a whole lot of prayer. I just loved that story. she decided then that, you know, because of her ill health and things like that, it was suggested that maybe some of the friends from New Zealand and Australia were planning to go on pilgrimage. And so she applied to go on pilgrimage with the friends. And in those days, even though right now we can't go very far in an airplane, in those days they had no Ryanair or Qantas to hop on. So she had to book a passage by ship. And the ship traveled around the coast of Australia, dropping off in all the various ports and overnighting in some cases, where she would disembark and visit the friends for the period of time that the ship would be there, and then eventually sail across the Indian Ocean into the Suez Canal. And a shocking fact about that was that the ship was charged, and I couldn't believe the figure. At that time, it was £4,000 sterling for the ship to traverse through the Suez Canal, and that's an extortionate amount of money. But the ship had to travel through there, and then she disembarked and eventually arrived in Haifa. Now, here we have a lady who has suffered some ill health. She's white. She's now she's about 45 years of age. Single, and the culture shock and change from the Australian culture to a Middle Eastern culture, where camels prevailed, donkeys, mud huts, women completely covered from head to toe, was just a total shock. Dust, the dryness, and it took some time to adjust. So she came to Haifa, and she was met by the wonderful Fujita, who, as you all know, was a servant of Abdul Baha until his passing, and then stayed on to serve Shoghi Effendi. He came originally from Japan, and he met her at the train station and brought her by carriage up to the Western Pilgrim House, where she stayed for the duration of her pilgrimage. She stayed, in those days they had the bounty of having a 19-day pilgrimage, so she stayed for the 19-day pilgrimage. She became very, very close to the Holy Family, to the ladies, particularly in the household of the Holy Family, and had a great attachment to them. But at the end of her pilgrimage, she had made plans to go to visit family and connections from her English background in the United Kingdom. So she went by boat again to the United Kingdom, arriving in the port of Southampton, I believe, and travelled to London and stayed for approximately 3 months. On the 1st of June, I think it was 1923, I can't remember the date exactly, she travelled by ship again back to Haifa. She hadn't intended to, she had intended to go directly back to Australia, but the Baha'is in Haifa begged her to come back and visit with them and stay with them on her return. So she duly obliged. When she arrived in Haifa, everybody, or almost everybody, Shoghi Effendi at this point in time was in Switzerland on his holiday, much needed, as we all know, from the amount of extraordinary work levels he did. When she arrived in Haifa, everybody was ill with a flu or a virus. How things have changed. Not. So there was an immediate requirement for assistance, you know, cooking meals and preparing food for the friends who were ill, who couldn't manage, for the making of beds for the pilgrims coming. And Effie, being the kind of nature that she was, just got stuck in straight away, helping prepare meals, making beds, preparing the pilgrim houses for the pilgrims coming. And as the members of the household who were normally doing these duties recovered, they kept her on and they asked her to stay, and they begged her to stay. She had passages booked. She kept on having to change these passages, the dates of these passages, because of her love for staying in Haifa and her enjoyment. This was not easy work by any stretch of the imagination. The days were very long, from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. No respite. She also became aware of poverty-stricken children and women in the surrounding areas of the holy sites of the Baha'i Faith. And so she began a program of assisting Arab women who were more or less destitute and, you know, were treated as lower than the lowest. They were really cast out by their local community, whether they were having unplanned or children. So there was no protection for them. And Effie set about organizing food and clothing for them and looking after the children and helping. So she would do this 2 and 3 days a week. And she called then on other people to assist. This actually grew enormously. So when she started, there was only a small handful. By the time she left Haifa many years later, they were assisting over 3,000 women in this capacity, which I just think is quite extraordinary. From nothing, from just a desire to assist. When Shoghi Effendi returned from Haifa, or from Switzerland, he could see the extraordinary work that Effie was doing and asked her to stay on. There's somebody there with some background, but that's okay. Did somebody want to ask a question or something? No?
No, proceed. I will look for that.
It doesn't matter. It's not distracting me. It might be distracting some of the friends, though.
Now, Michael, we're looking forward to you continuing the story and looking forward to the photos.
Okay, I'll keep her going. So we're now at 1925. And Shoghi Effendi, over the next number of years, realized what an extraordinary talent Effie had. She also, there's another thing that actually Graham is only making a discovery of through some context that I had. She, because of her incredibly sensitive, quiet, unegotistical, unlike myself, nature, she actually became quite close to the covenant breakers who were occupying the mansion of Baji. And Shoghi Effendi had asked her to take some photographs around the development of the shrines. He was constructing the grounds all around the shrine of the Bab. And what he did was, he could see, as I said, from Effie's talent, she made then from, as we saw the photograph earlier of her wooden models, she actually made a model of the grounds and the surrounding area around the shrine of the Bab. And Shoghi Effendi was able to come to this model as like an aerial view and come in and look at it from an aerial view, as it were, and move things around and lay the path that way, and no, we won't do it that way, and we'll change it and do it this way and do it that way. So all of that initial development of the lands and the gardens, the way they're currently laid out around the Shrine of the Bab, came from models that were made by Effie Baker. She then was able to, at the same time, go out to Baji, and she took some photographs out of Baji. The covenant breakers, she got connected with them. She became friendly in a sense, and they allowed her into the mansion of Baji. And she took photographs internally in the mansion of Baji. And yesterday, I think, yes, yesterday was the ascension of Baha'u'llah, as we know. Upstairs in the mansion of Baji is the room where Baha'u'llah ascended into the next world. When Shoghi Effendi got possession of the mansion of Baji from the covenant breakers, that room was stripped bare, nothing in it, completely filthy, coal and other rubbish strewn about. But because of Effie's ability to connect with the covenant breakers, she had gone in prior to the removal of the covenant breakers and taken photographs of that room. So the way you see that room laid out now is from the photographs of Effie Baker. There are two photographs upstairs on the first floor, on the same level, in one of the other rooms above one of the fireplaces, of the originals of Effie Baker's photographs. So whenever you have the bounty of going on pilgrimage, you will be able to see those two photographs that she originally took of that room. Of course, when Shoghi Effendi got that possession of the mansion back, the photographs enabled him to reconstruct the room to the way that Effie had seen it in the photographs. Plus, he also was able to manage to
Well, hopefully that's something temporary on Michael's end. We'll just wait and see whether we'll just be patient and see what happens there. Michael, if you can hear us, I've just sent you a message. You're frozen. So it looks like Michael's just jumped out of the meeting. He'll rejoin us. I think that sometimes happens, just part of the Zoom process. So just be patient and come back.
Sure. Well, I think I should just a quick introduction then to that aspect of the photographs and how that came about. I don't know how much the friends know of the story. So, but I'll try and be brief because I know, what time are we now? 15:15 something or other. I don't know what time it is in Australia. It's 11:15 here in the morning.
Yes, it's 8:15 in the evening. We've got certainly another 45 minutes
Okay.
and we beyond that, but
No. Okay.
I want you to share as much as you want with us tonight, but we don't know how long each of the friends can stay with us. But Michael,
Okay.
please proceed. We're looking forward to seeing these photos. While you were offline, people were telling me how much they're enjoying your presentation so far.
Oh, I don't know. Thank you very much. I'm flattered, totally. So, as I said, Shoghi Effendi really had an understanding of the skill of this lady. He had repeatedly written in the late 1920s. So from 1927 onwards, he had written to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Persia at that time, asking the friends there to please record all of the artifacts relating to the early believers in the faith. So anything relating to the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the artifacts, the buildings associated with. And he repeatedly asked them and nothing happened. Almost nothing, no photographs or anything. Shoghi Effendi, as we know, was a very insightful person. He knew that things were about to change. The government had changed and now there was huge investment in construction, in new roads and modernizing the major metropolises of Persia. So there was bulldozing going on and destruction. Plus there was also severe animosity towards the Baha'i community, as we well know, persecution. So things relating to the faith were being destroyed. And Shoghi wanted to record some of these artifacts. When nothing happened, he came to Effie Baker, who was now almost 50 years of age. She was 49 and a half. And he asked her to go to Persia. Prior to that, sorry, there's another little story that I just love. Just prior to that, he had decided that it was time for Effie to return to Australia. So they took one last trip together out to Babi, and on the morning that she was due to go, she was visiting the shrine of the Bab. And as she was walking along the terrace, she saw Shoghi Effendi coming down the steps with some Persian believers who he excused himself from and came down to Effie. And he said, remember our conversation yesterday that a good general will always send his good soldiers out into battle and keep his enemies close by. Well, today I've changed my mind. I want to keep you close by. And Effie says, so I'm one of the bad soldiers then, am I? I heard somebody much earlier on in our general introduction saying that Effie had a wonderful sense of humor. So this is obviously a sense of that. So following on from that, it was decided that Effie would go to Persia. And he sent her downtown into Haifa to purchase all the film that she could possibly manage to get, which she duly did. She had two cameras, a Kodak A1 stills camera and a smaller for close-up. She had these two cameras and she went and got film for all of them. Actually, when I'm doing my physical presentation, I have the cameras as well. Not the originals, but absolute complete copies of them. I wish I had the originals, but I have absolute replicas in perfect condition of the two original cameras that she had. Unfortunately, I can't obviously present them in this format. And you can see from those cameras how difficult it would have been for Effie. She traveled by car across into Iraq and across into Persia to take these photographs for Shoghi Effendi. At that time, of course, women, especially particularly Western women, were not welcome at all in Persia. So she had to cover herself up. The heat was insurmountable. It was midsummer when she set off. So you're talking 30, 40, 50 degrees heat, traveling across desert. I have one of her photographs here, if I can just find it now, which I will share to you with you as quickly as I possibly can. It's one of the most difficult, I never can find it. It's a wonderful photograph. So she set off on this mission. And it was just extraordinary, I think, that a woman of that period traveling into a total and utter second class, you know, I mean, it was third world, really. There's a wonderful story of when Effie travels through Persia. And
can I suggest, I can see that your photos are numbered there, and you've shown us the workbench. I don't know if they're in order or not, but I think that might be one way to get through them.
I think one of them that I want to show is on another file somewhere. I'm just looking for it.
Okay.
I'm just looking for it. It's one on its own. Besides that, she asks the local women, is there any chance of a bath? So they have a big hall and they gather all the water from the village and they heat it up and they bring it into her. And then she notices that they're all standing around. And she inquires of them, oh, but they've never seen a Western woman bath before. They're all going to observe this if they can. Effie, of course, not being of that, is rather taken aback and asks them to all to leave. I just thought that was rather amusing story. I'm sorry if I can't locate this right this second. I will find it. I might move on to some other photographs in the meantime. Yeah, I'll do that.
Did you give that a double click?
I gave it a click, maybe too many, did I?
Double click. Click, click.
Have you got it?
Yes, it's there.
Can you see that? Okay, so
that's right.
A little bit of background on this. It looks like just a field. It's just a field. It is. It's the field where the Babis set up the tent when they were having the conference with Baha'u'llah, the field of Badash. It was in this field that Tahira unveiled herself, in that very spot. This is can you see this one?
Michael, they're all coming up now, so you just go through those photos and tell us your insights about.
You can see this one?
Absolutely.
So this is in Tabriz. It's a pity these are on Zoom, because in reality I have these photographs. I don't know if you can see you can't see me. So I would have them like this size now for my presentations and bigger. Can you see that?
Michael, if you want to show us that, you would finish the hang on. There now we can see you. If we go to speak, if people go to speaker view, they can see that image that you're bringing up with you in your room. Hold it up again to the screen, and people can see it.
Beautiful.
So when I wrote to the Universal House of Justice and asked for the photographs, they sent me in a digital file, and they came absolutely minuscule, tiny little things. And I downloaded them and I sent them to a friend of mine who wasn't a Baha'i.
Sorry, now I've got to say, please share your screen again, because I unshared it. Share where you're on the photos and continue with that.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry about that.
This is very technical.
Yeah.
I can't even find myself.
Oh my God, come on.
There's so many people here. Where am I gone? Oh yeah, there I am. So I have to double click on this, do I, and share screen?
Yes, you've got share screen at the bottom. There we go.
Okay, groovy.
Excellent. So we're back in business, so I'll keep quiet and you continue with this wonderful presentation.
So these photographs, when I got them, when I received them from the Universal House of Justice, you have to bear in mind that when Effie Baker took these photographs, she was taking them on plate glass. Wasn't like film that we have nowadays. And within the plate glass, an awful lot of dust had gathered, bits of sand and grit. So when we got the photographs, they were quite speckled and grubby and dusty. So through the technology of kind of an enhancement process without doing any damage whatsoever to the content of the photographs or altering them in any way, we cleaned them up. The photographer's name is Fergal McGanity. In fact, his daughter, Emma, is living in Australia at the moment, and their son, Robbie, is living in New Zealand. I don't know if they're involved in the Baha'i community. But he did a lot of great work on these photographs. So some of these photographs appear in Dawnbreakers, but most of these have never been seen before. So as I said, this is Tabriz, and when we got this, you couldn't hardly see anything in it. So we digitally and cleaned it all up. These then were all, when that was all done, we informed the House of Justice about it, and they were uploaded back into to the House of Justice for use for future references and for archive purposes. So this is the archway at the rear of where the Bob was executed, where his body was dumped. This is one of those photographs taken earlier than 1930 that I was telling you about the mansion of Baji. That Effie was able to approach that building without any difficulty. Shoghi Effendi couldn't go near it. None of the other Baha'is could go near it, could even go near it at all. But Effie managed to get there and get these lovely photographs. This is Isfahan. I don't know if I'm able to make that picture bigger. But in this courtyard, can you see my cursor? Can anybody see that cursor moving backwards and forwards?
Yes. 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 Yes.
In that courtyard, if I was to big that photograph up, as it were, you can see lots of people standing around and moving about. The roofs.
Michael, last time you were able to do it, you pulled down the magnifying glass up in the where the icons are, and you were able to make it larger and show us.
Aha. that better? Can
Yes,
you see
thank you.
people in the
Yes, we can.
courtyard? You can see people in the middle of the courtyard there. You can also see the the structure of the roofs are covered in sand in sort of all of these undulating lumps. I'm not an architect, but just out of common sense, I'm believing that this is to allow heat to deflect off, and in the winter time to keep heat in. There wouldn't have been central heating in those days. That's an opinion that I have. I could be completely wrong, but it's just so interesting to see the structure and layout of these buildings. And you consider that what Effie has come from in Australia to this, she had to completely cover herself up. She would arrive in Isfahan, for example, and she would have a mission guided by the National Spiritual Assembly of Persia and her instructions from Shoghi Effendi to get as many photographs as she could in the limited time that was available to her. So she would arrive in Isfahan, for argument's sake, today. She would take the photographs and they would be camping probably at the side of a road or in a small inn somewhere on the outskirts of Isfahan. She would go in and set up a tent in the nighttime using a small torch with a red filter across it, develop these photographs herself using locally drawn sourced water to develop the photographs, because she couldn't move on from Isfahan if the photographs weren't right. She had no way of coming back another day. It was today, that was it. Take the photographs. She had to check that everything was perfect and record those photographs and keep them and move on. She made 3 copies of all of the photographs. She sent 1 copy to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Iran. She sent another copy to Fujita. I'm struggling to see why this won't move on to the next picture. Aha.
It's
I got
because
it. I got it.
You've got to get it back to it. Okay.
I got it. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just a bit of a dinosaur. So she made 3 copies of all of the photographs. 1 she sent to the Universal House, to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Persia, 1 to Fujita, and the 3rd to Shoghi Effendi. She only sent these periodically because she was only in Tehran where she could get access to postage. She couldn't trust posting them from villages in the middle of nowhere. So she only did this periodically to return the photographs back. I love this photograph. I'm quite sure that many of you are thinking, what's this about? Let's have some interaction in relation to this, if that's possible, Graham. I'll go back, sorry. Back I go. Does anybody want to offer what they think this might be?
I think it's Masjid-i Vakil in Shiraz.
Yeah. So literally around the corner from these columns is the pulpit from which the Bab declared his mission. For some reason, yeah, I got it. We'll do the zoom again on this because this is beautiful.
This is the Masjid-i Vakil, which is not far from the house of the Bab.
Yeah, and where he declared on that pulpit. So we all know that little photograph. This is just another building within that. Lovely, isn't it? Powerful photograph. This is Shiraz. Again, if I can zoom. We can see if that was in color. This design work and fretwork on the edge of the buildings is just stunning. As I said, when these photographs, if you were to open your book, Nabil's narrative, and look at the photographs that are there. They're so small, they're not much bigger than a matchbox. It's very hard to get any detail. So it's really nice to have this level of detail. I'm planning on getting many more photographs from the House of Justice and doing this work. Well, that's if they give them to me. They'll probably say, go away, little boy. This is the first photograph taken of the electrification of the hill in Mount Carmel leading up to the Shrine of the Bab on the night of the first electrification that was switched on. I think if I zoom, if I can, it's not happening. No, it's okay. This is, we all know what this is. House of the Bab, taken from a very different angle, or a slightly different angle where you can see the orange tree very clearly. Again, as I said, Effie had to take extreme caution taking these photographs. She couldn't be seen to be doing this kind of work, and would have had to develop these photographs that evening to make absolute sure that they were of a good enough quality to record and keep. Can everybody still hear me? I'm only able to see the pictures. I can't see anybody else at the moment.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Talking to my teacup.
We can hear you clearly.
Good, good, great stuff. And you're all still awake.
Yep.
Shoghi Effendi always says that he just loved this photograph because of his fondness of the greatest holy leaf. This again taken by Effie. So here we have a lovely photograph of Effie with some early believers and on the car. Now Effie's standing regularly and Fujita is standing on the running plate of the car and he's barely taller than her. So he must have been very wee, very small. Lovely photograph. There's a little bit of discussion about this photograph, but the House of Justice in their communication with me say that this is in the barrack square where the Bab was executed. Our image of that photograph is always of a building much more ramshackled than that. But I believe that this is part of that courtyard. And you can see, if you can follow my cursor, some chaps standing on the wall. So that wall, that area up there is where the 10,000 people who observed the execution and martyrdom of the Bab would have been standing. I'm going to leave that on for a moment because I think it maybe friends like to have a prayer or whatever at this point. This is our friend, the wonderful Effie Baker. I just love this portrait. She's just a beautiful woman. Dedicated her whole life. This is an incredible photograph of a tribe of Fars, F-A-R-S. This is a region within Persia, from which actually the Bab came from as well. Now, he was not a member of this particular tribe, but this is a tribe of Fars. In the center is the gendarme, the police. He would have been the boss of this area, followed by the leader of the tribe, the guy with the very small pipe. I'll zoom in on some of these characters. I love the hairstyles. I think there must have been COVID going on there. All the barber shops were closed. Because some of them, this guy, look at the state of the hair on that lad. The women are not completely covered and veiled, but this little chap on the foreground, right where my cursor is very expressive. I think he wanted to be somewhere else that day. He didn't want to be in this photograph anyway. He didn't get his McDonald's. Incredible photograph of people and their, so that you can imagine Effie, white, now, you know, ill, struggling with her health, slightly stooped in this environment, trying to take photographs with this complete and utter culture difference to what she was used to. This is a group of women believers in Ardakan. This is also an example of how some of the photographs came to us. We really couldn't manage. The negative was so badly damaged on this that we couldn't improve it more than the way we have. We just couldn't. We did everything technically that we could. But this is the level of quality of a lot of the photographs that you are now seeing came to us in. This is, there's been a lot of discussion about this. When this house came to me, this photograph came to me, it came, and you can see it there, the house of the Bab. Subsequently, Mujan Muman has translated the little sign above the door saying reading room. And if I can zoom in, I'll try to a little bit. You can see that it's actually a classroom when Effie got the photograph. It wasn't. You can see chairs stacked up in the room. In fact, if it was a clearer photograph rather than on Zoom, you can actually see a map on the wall. So it was a classroom. But I believe my understanding right now, the most up-to-date understanding on this photograph, is that this is the house in which the Bab was brought to, where he was bastinyadoed. I can't remember the name of the chap that carried it out because he had a big long name, and I'm sorry, I'm just not proficient on that right this minute. I should have written it down. This is the town of Qum, Q-U-M, en route from Mecca and Medina after his pilgrimage. The Bab came to the outskirts of this town, and he was very strongly advised by his traveling companions, do not enter this city. It is a very holy city, but the area surrounding the mosque is full of despots and desperate characters, and they will cause you terrible trouble and strife. So he had to travel around the outskirts. You can still see that many years after the time of the Bab would have passed it, that it's quite primitive in many, many ways. But it's a very interesting photograph. So mode of transport was camel and donkey. And they're all loaded up, ready for the caravanserai. There's very few people in the photograph. No cars or wires, telephones, mobile phones. The women are completely covered. A lot of rubble, but also within the background are all of the mosques and the minarets. There's a quotation in there's a reference to this in Nabil's narrative about, you know, how wonderful it is that it's full of holy sites and yet full of despots and not a good place to be. This is another photograph of the outskirts of Tehran. A tree on the outskirts. But I love the architecture and the structure of these photographs. I just need to change the angle here a little bit. This is an incredible photograph. So this is Yazd, with the mountains in the background. That concludes for the moment. There is one more that I will hopefully find. So I don't know where to, I'm sure some of the friends want to raise some questions at this stage. I mean, Effie's work continued, and I can mention a couple of other key factors of her life. One of the things, for any of you who have been to Haifa or have photographs of the Shrine of the Bab, on the four corners of the Shrine of the Bab is the greatest name. The full surround of that greatest name was all designed by Effie Baker. So we look at the life of Effie Baker in Haifa over that period of time. And you go on pilgrimage now and you walk into the pilgrim houses. The bed covers, most of them were made, that are currently on the beds in Haifa. And the curtains were mostly made by Effie Baker. The layout of the gardens was inspired by her work, which Shoghi Effendi, obviously, he carried it all out in the development of it. I mean, she would never have wanted to acknowledge. And this is part of the wonderful essence of Effie, is that she never wanted ever the recognition that she, I think, completely and utterly truly deserves for this work that she has done. So the layout of the gardens around the Shrine of the Bab is down to some of the model making that she did. These photographs that are throughout the book of Nabil's narrative, and those additional ones that I've just shown you, and more that I will get. I mean, there are 1,000 altogether, 400 in Nabil's narrative, which over a period of time, I'm hoping that through guidance and support from the House of Justice and the Archives Department, we'll get and we'll enlarge, clean them up, and be able to maybe do some other exhibition. The photo, the way the Hamanshna Baji bedroom is laid out for the shrine of the Ascension of Baha'u'llah, the artwork on the edge of the buildings, all designed by Effie Baker, an extraordinary woman. That does not take into consideration any of the work that many of you mentioned earlier on about her teaching in Australia, her development of the faith, her children's classes, her junior youth groups, her minding and service at the Majra Ladkar in Sydney. Where do we stop with this lady? Sorry, Graham.
Michael, were you looking for that photo of Effie from the back on the trail?
That's it.
I will put it up for you.
Oh, thank you. I'm just bewildered with this. I'm sorry. I love that photograph. So
Please
here,
tell us what's happening in the photograph.
Pardon?
Please tell us what's happening in this photograph.
So here we have Effie traveling across the mountains. That's Effie, obviously the first person that we see stooped up with a walking cane. I don't know whether you can enlarge that, but you can see she's bent over, leaning on a walking cane, and ahead of her are 3 donkeys with her photographic equipment and probably her overnight bag, or, you know, all her little personal bits and pieces, and 2 or 3 guides helping her and translators. This is the sacrifice. This lady from Australia, your predecessor in the faith, sacrificed for us. I'm going to start crying. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Michael, thank you so much. There are some questions starting to come in. So I think now, if you're ready for that, I think you may have generated some questions. And I think in this case, people, could you please unmute, ask your question, and then mute again, and Michael can have a chance to answer. One way to do it is to put your hand up. The little blue icon. John Handy, did you have a question?
I just had a couple of points of interest that Effie had told me. One was with her photographs in Persia, she had to carry with her all her chemicals for the development of those glass plates because they weren't available in Persia. And she used to carry her camera inside her chadar, and she would open it just slightly and click and hope that she would get a photograph. And the other one was that you mentioned the photograph she took in the mansion at Baji. Around the balcony of the mansion, there are a number of murals. She also painted in watercolours all those murals around that balcony for Shoghi Effendi. That was all. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that contribution, because I genuinely didn't know that until now. I did wonder who did that. But you know, when you're on pilgrimage, especially a character like me, I asked so many questions I couldn't ask anymore. But I'm so glad you shared that with us. Sorry, Graham, do you want to undo your screen share so we can see more of the participants?
I have a question.
Thank you.
Yes. Verna, and then Thelma, and then Colin Brest.
I believe Effie, when she was travelling around Persia, she often dressed as a boy. This was written up in her diary that she loaned us to read many, many years ago. Yeah. And this is a little photograph that she gave us that she took of Abdul Baha and the Greatest Holy Leaf. Thank you.
Thank you, Verna. Let me just clarify on that she didn't take photos of Abdul Baha because he had passed away in 21 and she went in 1925. But she did have access to some of the negatives that were there, and I understand that she reprinted those. Okay, so thanks. So I think Thelma and then Colin.
Did Shoghi Effendi give Effie Baker a list of all the places that he wanted photographed?
Yes, but not only did Shoghi Effendi do it, her first initial visit when she arrived in Iran was to go, or Persia as it was then, was to go to the National Spiritual Assembly, who gave her guidance. Lots of it. I mean, they were very supportive. The fact that Shoghi Effendi had written to them repeatedly asking the friends to take the photographs was one matter. But when Effie arrived, they were very supportive and gave her loads of guidance. I mean, there's so much more to this story that I haven't managed in this period of time to cover. For example, can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Of course we can, Michael. Go ahead.
So,
Yes.
for example, she would be traveling, and when the weather started to turn from the heat into the extreme cold, they were stuck outside a small village. The car was stuck in ice, and they took shelter with some local people. And in the following morning, when they went to start the car was completely and utterly, the engine block was just ice, pure ice. And it took them hours to actually get a chip and a pick and a hammer to chip the ice off the engine. On one journey alone that they were making, they had to stop up to 16 times in the day to fix the repairs in the tires. And they weren't like pulling into, I don't know what you have in Australia, but we have advanced tires here, and the lads go in with a wee drill and they take it off, and they, you stand there and you'll have a coffee. It was nothing like that. Huge big wheels, and they had to carry all the spare parts and the patches and everything and fix them. I mean, it was a world away from the way we live life now. This is the photograph. Can you see that, Cher?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Of the Greatest Holy Leaf. Effie was taking photographs relating to the Bob that Ruhia Hanum had asked, or Bahia Hanum had asked her to take. And she had one plate left, and she had asked repeatedly, can she take a photograph? And she was always refused. No. She was, no way was. And eventually, actually, this one day, she was in her room and asked, can I take a photograph? And she took this. Under the table, can you see the table beside? There's a vase of flowers. You can't really see it, but there's a vase of flowers. This is believed. Now, there's no absolute guarantee, but this is believed to be where for a period of time, the remains of the Bab were kept hidden. And that's why there's a vase of flowers under that table. They were obviously not in there at this time, years earlier. That's just, it may not be true at all.
Well, I'd like to step in there, and that is very, very true, because Effie told me when she used to visit us that she always wondered why the greatest holy leaf sort of bent in prayer as she entered her room. And she asked her one day why she did that. And she told Effie that there, under those flowers, or it was in a trunk under the bed, was
Correct.
the remains of the Bab.
Yeah.
Thank you for
So
that.
it is a true story.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
John.
you so much for sharing
I have
that.
a few hands up. Colin is next.
Share now as
and
well.
then Olia, and then Anne
Graham.
Starr.
Sorry, Graham, just before.
Colin, you are next, and then Olia, and then Anne.
Can you see this photograph?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, you're waiting for me to speak. You can see the shrine of the Bab was originally.
No, we're just waiting for Colin to ask his question. So, Colin,
Right.
now you're.
While he's coming in, you can
I'm
see.
not asking a question. I'm just telling you, Michael, that in the National Archives in Sydney, we have the cameras that Effie used.
The originals.
Yeah.
I'm coming to Australia.
I used to be involved with the archives, and we've got quite a collection of stuff that belongs to Effie.
Yeah. I mean, I'm at the far side of the world, and it's difficult. Did somebody enlarge that for me? They did. This is the shrine of the Bab, and the later edition, you can see it's not quite the same as the original. This is the piece that was added on for the remains of Abdul Baha. And the early trees, I mean, it's just so dramatically different to the way we know things now. I don't know how to get out of that photograph now. Anyway.
Just a minor correction, Michael. The Abdul Baha is buried in the room towards the ocean, not the room.
But at this point in time, I think he was in this additional section that you can see. It's a different coloration. It's added on.
That
That
room
was
was
put on
definitely
by
added on. That room was definitely added on, but that's not where Abdul Baha was buried.
Okay. Sorry.
He's in here.
Yeah, no, he's in the front actually, isn't he? And as it were over the bay, as if you were looking at it from the terraces.
Michael, say that the rear three rooms, the back section of the Shrine of the Bab, as you have just noted, when my father visited there in 1942, they were being used as the International Archives at the time. So they weren't, they were part of the shrine, but there was nobody interned there. That was where the archives were held.
Okay. This is incredible. We're learning so much tonight.
It's Michael here. If you see on the left of this picture, you can see the house of Abbas Cooley here. And on the top is the room where Abdul Baha, no, not that one.
Okay,
right here. this was pulled down in the 1930s, but this was a house where Abdul Baha used to stay. You know, when you read about him coming to stay near the shrine, which he did as often as possible, he would stay in a room that was specially built for him on the top floor. The front of that house is facing uphill, but there was a balcony on this side where he could come out and stand, but he would also meet people on the ground floor, like pilgrims and things like that. So often when you see the photographs of people at the shrine, you don't actually see the shrine in the background, you see this house in the background.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear all these, you know.
And if you can see the wires that going across here, see the wires going across there to that building? These are the wires that, yeah, they're the wires that conveyed the electricity from the generator room, which was, the generator room was between the Eastern Pilgrim House and the road, Mountain Road. But these are the wires that carried the electricity because you wouldn't want the generator close to the shrine.
It's great, isn't it? This is wonderful.
Thank you. Now we had a few hands up. Olya is next, and then Anne Stark.
Olya, you have to.
Olya, please unmute yourself.
I don't know whether you can see the picture.
Olya, please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Me or not?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead now.
Okay. I would like to know Effie Baker how long stay in Iran?
Okay, Effie stayed, she was planning, the trip was planned originally for 3 months, but she ended up 6 months. So she went in June and she came back around towards the end of December. So her last meeting, I believe, with the National Spiritual Assembly was towards the very end of December in the depths of winter. This is when all this ice and freezing conditions started to take hold.
How long stay in Shiraz? Have you any record?
No, mostly only 1 or 2 nights in any particular place. It was very dangerous for her to stay longer. People, you know, she just couldn't hang around, as it were. I mean, it sounds, one of the friends shared with us about her experiences of wearing the chador and having to be very unassuming. And there was a lot of work to do. Iran is a huge country for a woman of her age to have to travel in the modes of transport. I mean, we see that she had to use donkeys and carts to get around and walk over the mountains, and you know, and in fact there was some places that were so inaccessible that she couldn't travel to. Her assistant, and Graham will assist me with his name, who was a very good photographer, would take off on a little old motorcycle and maybe travel for 3 or 4 hours into the absolute wilds and get some photographs because Effie couldn't manage.
Yes. Any record have you got which house in Shiraz? In the stay with family Baha'i in Shiraz or Tehran or Isfahan, or go to hotel or somewhere else?
No hotels. Some of the stories tell of her arriving in a village with nowhere to stay, and they would lay rush mats out on the side of the road and sleep on them with a blanket, or in the back of the car. No comforts. There was no, she looked everywhere for the Holiday Inn and it wasn't there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Olya. We do have she wrote a memoir. It's called My Trip to Persia, and that will be published soon. It has been published in the past in the Baha'i Bulletin many years ago, but when the book comes out, published by George Ronald, those details will be in there. She didn't stay for many days, as Michael has said. In each city, she stayed just long enough to take the photos, but she visited Tehran at least 3 times because she came back to consult with the local assembly there about where she should travel next to complete her mission. So that's a bit of an answer there. Now, next is Anne Stark and then Neil Podger.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you very much, Michael. Michael, I also wanted to back up John Handley's story. Effie Baker also told me about the way in which the Greatest Holy Leaf would be so full of devotion and respect as she went to her own room. But that's not why I put my hand up. It was to mention, in terms of Effie's role as a member of the first group of pilgrims from Australia and New Zealand, that in number 4 Hapasim, which is opposite the Western Pilgrim House, opposite the House of the Master, you'll see a number of photographs of Effie with her fellow pilgrims. And so it's just lovely that in the house that she served in so devotedly later on, there are photographs placed on the wall of Effie in that. And given that we're talking about photographs that Effie took, it's nice to think that Effie herself has her photograph in the in number 4 Hapasim.
Thank you, Anne. That's lovely. Neil Podger, please. Hello, Neil.
Sorry, Graham, while we're waiting. Graham.
Yes.
Can you see what I'm sharing now?
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
Do you know what it is?
Well, tell us. I'm
This is the remains of the Bab when they arrived from Iran in the sarcophagus into Israel, into Haifa. This is an extraordinary, extraordinary photograph.
What it actually is on the left-hand side is the container that the sarcophagus was in. I don't know whether it was in at that stage. And on the right is probably the lid.
Okay, I'm not going to dispute because I'm not any wiser than that. I have been told it's the sarcophagus.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, it's a container. Whether or not it's still in there, I don't know. But that was certainly the container for the sarcophagus.
No, I don't think the remains of the Bab are in the container at this point in time when that photograph was taken.
No.
Oh no, I
So,
wasn't
thank
sorry.
you.
I'm sorry if you thought I was implying that. No.
Neil? Neil, unfortunately, we can't hear you. There's no volume, even though you're not muted, but at the moment, there's no volume. If you can sort that out, we'll hear your question. Let's see if there's anybody else on that. Neil, can't hear you. There's no volume coming through, even though you're unmuted. So your microphone is not working at the moment, Neil. We can't hear you. You can type something, but we can't hear you. So, sorry.
Can I just ask before you're probably due to close now very shortly? I'm coming from a completely different side of the world, totally different perspective, historically and in every other way to all my friends here now in Australia. Did you gain anything from what I've shared with you today?
Absolutely, we did.
همون دوربینی که همین افی برده اصل دوربین و ایستری
I can't hear anything.
I tried having everybody off unmuted to see if they gave you a response, but it didn't work quite well. So
can I ask a question just before we finish? Because it's the one question. Why was she chosen to do the photographs? Why didn't they use a local person, a local Baha'i from Persia, Iranian Baha'i, to take the photos? Because they would be unobtrusive, not like a white woman from Australia. I wondered why it wasn't somebody locally.
As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, Shoghi Effendi for 3 years constantly had written to the National Spiritual Assembly asking for this to be done, and it wasn't. It just wasn't done by the Baha'is on the ground in Persia. And he could see, as we know, he had incredible foresight. He could foresee what was going to happen, and absolutely totally did, to the destruction of many, many, many of the holy sites associated with the early believers of the Baha'i Faith. He could see it coming. But he also saw the innate, total dedication and love and experience and skill that Effie Baker showed. To be trusted with such an onerous task. I think any one of us, if Shoghi Effendi came to us and asked to do a task like that, we'd fall over.
So Neil, I don't know whether your microphone issue is fixed, but you've texted there to say that Effie gave you and Werner her original of her diary. Did you think this information was of value? And you said yes, yes, yes. But are you saying that you still have the original of her diary? Let's see if we can unmute you and see if that's working.
Yes, of course it's of value.
We were so privileged to be able to view it. That was the amazing thing. And it's just I was quite surprised. Effie, of course, thought, geez, don't throw it out. Goodness gracious. Did you hear that?
Thank you, Neil. We did hear that, and Verna's got her hand up as well to continue that story. Verna.
Yes, I was just going to say it's purely on loan, and it obviously was returned to her in those very early days after we thoroughly read it, because it was most fascinating. That's where we heard about her dressing as a boy too, when in some places when she was in Iran, so she wouldn't be detected as a woman. Thank you.
Well, thank you all, and thank you to Michael for this presentation. It's been a thrilling event tonight. Everybody has learned, everybody's been inspired by Effie's story, and you bring it to life in such a wonderful, fresh way. I think everybody will remember this evening and look forward to your future work that you will do on her photographic record to do justice to her service to the faith. And so thank you so much, Michael, for coming online tonight. It's always hard to finish a Zoom session. How can we say thanks to you?
I'm first of all deeply honoured that I've been asked by Australians of all people to talk about one of your own. It's like an Australian coming to Ireland and talking about St. Patrick. Seems a bit odd, but I just have as you can probably tell, a real passion about this service of this one woman. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of Baha'is around the world who have extended extraordinary service. You could nearly just open up any, one of the older Baha'i books and just read any story, whether it's George Townsend or Adib Tarazadeh or Enoch Kalinga, or, I mean, the list goes on. But Effie's was one of total sacrifice without ask of any description. And I just wish I could gain that skill And thank you, everybody. I would love to come to Australia and give the physical presentation of the photographs at some point in the future. I prefer to travel like Effie did by ship and not by airplane, but we'll see. Thank you so much. Loving greetings from Ireland.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Graham. Was fantastic, amazing night. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.